He ceased, and heard their grant and loud acclaim. Then forthwith to him takes a chosen band of spirits likest to himself in guile, to be at hand, and at his beck appear, if cause were to unfold some active scene, of various persons, each to know his part. Then to the desert takes with these his flight, where still from shade to shade the Son of God, after 40 days fasting had remained, now hungering first, and to himself thus said, Where will this end? 4 times 10 days I have passed, wandering this woody maze, and humane food nor tasted nor had appetite. That fast to virtue I impute not, or count part of what I suffer here, if nature need not, or God support nature without repast, though needing. What praise is it to endure? But now I feel I hunger, which declares nature hath need of what she asks, yet God can satisfy that need some other way. Though hunger still remain, so it remain without this body's wasting. I content me, and from the sting of famine fear no harm, nor mind it, fed with better thoughts that feed me hungering more to do my Father's will. It was the hour of night, when thus the Son communed in silent walk, then laid him down under the hospitable covert nigh of trees thick interwoven. There he slept, and dreamed, as appetite is wont to dream, of meats and drinks, nature's refreshments sweet. Him thought he by the brook of Cherith stood, and saw the ravens with their horny beaks food to Elijah bringing even and morn, though ravenous, taught to abstain from what they brought. He saw the prophet also, how he fled into the desert, and how there he slept under a juniper, then how awaked he found his supper on the coals prepared, and by the angel was bid rise and eat the second time after repose, the strength whereof sufficed him 40 days. Sometimes that with Elijah he partook, or as a guest with Daniel at his pulse. Thus wore out night, and now the herald lark left his ground nest, high towering to descry the morn's approach and greet her with his song. As lightly from his grassy couch uprose our Saviour, and found all was but a dream. Fasting he went to sleep, and fasting waked. Up to a hill anon his steps he reared, from whose high top to ken the prospect round, if cottage were in view, sheepcote or herd. But cottage, herd, or sheepcote none he saw, only in a bottom saw a pleasant grove, with chant of tuneful birds resounding loud. Thither he bent his way, determined there to rest at noon, and entered soon the shade, high-roofed, and walks beneath, and alleys brown, that opened in the midst a woody scene. Nature's own work it seemed, nature taught art, and to a superstitious eye the haunt of wood gods and wood nymphs. He viewed it round, when suddenly a man before him stood, not rustic as before, but seemlier clad, as one in city or court or palace bred, and with fair speech these words to him addressed. With granted leave, officious I return, but much more wonder that the Son of God in this wild solitude so long should bide, of all things destitute, and well I know not without hunger. Others of some note, as story tells, have trod this wilderness. The fugitive bondwoman with her son, outcast Nebaioth. Yet found he relief by a providing angel. All the race of Israel here had famished, had not God rained from heaven manna. And that prophet bold, native of Thebes, wandering here, was fed twice by a voice inviting him to eat. Of thee these 40 days none hath regard. 40 and more deserted here indeed. To whom thus Jesus, What concludest thou hence? They all had need. I, as thou seest, have none. How hast thou hunger then? Satan replied. Tell me, if food were now before thee set, wouldst thou not eat? Thereafter, as I like the giver, answered Jesus. Why should that cause thy refusal? Said the subtle fiend. Hast thou not right to all created things? Owe not all creatures by just right to thee duty and service, nor to stay till bid, but tender all their power? Nor I mention Nor mention I meats by the law unclean, or offered first to idols, those young Daniel could refuse, nor proffered by an enemy, though who would scruple that, with want oppressed? Behold nature ashamed, or better to express, troubled that thou shouldst hunger, hath purveyed from all the elements her choicest store to treat thee as beseems, and as her lord with honor only deign to sit and eat. He spake no dream, for as his words had end, our Saviour lifting up his eyes beheld in ample space under the broadest shade a table richly spread in regal mode, with dishes piled, and meats of noblest sort and savour, beasts of chase, or fowl of game and pastry built, or from the spit, or boiled, gris amber steamed, all fish from sea or shore, freshet or purling brook, of shell or fin, and exquisitest name, for which was drained Pontus and Lucrian Bay, and Afric coast. Alas, how simple to these cates compared was that crude apple that diverted Eve! And at a stately sideboard by the wine that fragrant smell diffused, in order stood tall stripling youths, rich clad, of fairer hue than Ganymede or Hylas. Distant more, under the trees, now tripped, now solemn stood nymphs of Diana's train, and Naiades, with fruits and flowers from Amalthea's horn, and ladies of the Hesperides, that seemed fairer than feigned of old or fabled since, of fairy damsels met in forest wide, by knights of Logres or of Lyonese, Lancelot or Peleus or Pellinore, and all the while harmonious airs were heard, of chiming strings or charming pipes, and wines of gentlest gale, Arabian odours fanned from their soft wings, and Flora's earliest smells. Such was the splendour, and the tempter now his invitation earnestly renewed. What doubts the Son of God to sit and eat? These are not fruits forbidden, no interdict defends the touching of these viands pure. Their taste no knowledge works, at least of evil, but life preserves, destroys life's enemy. Hunger with sweet restorative delight. All these are spirits of air and woods and springs, thy gentle ministers, who come to pay thee homage, and acknowledge thee their Lord. What doubt'st thou, Son of God? Sit down and eat. To whom thus Jesus temperately replied, Saidst thou not that to all things I had right? And who withholds my power that right to use? Shall I receive by gift what of my own? When and where likes me best I can command. I can at will, doubt not, as soon as thou, command a table in this wilderness, and call swift flights of angels ministrant, arrayed in glory, on my cup to attend. Why shouldst thou then obtrude this diligence in vain, where no acceptance it can find? And with my hunger what hast thou to do? Thy pompous delicacies I contemn, and count thy specious gifts no gifts but guiles. To whom thus answered Satan, malcontent, That I have also power to give thou seest, if of that power I bring thee voluntary what I might have bestowed on whom I pleased, and rather opportunely in this place chose to impart to thy apparent need. Why shouldst thou not accept it? But I see what I can do or offer is suspect. Of these things others quickly will dispose, whose pains have earned the far-fetched spoil. With that, both table and provision vanished quite, with sound of harpies' wings, and talons heard. Only the importune tempter still remained, and with these words his temptation pursued. By hunger that each other creature tames, thou art not to be harmed, therefore not moved. Thy temperance invincible besides, for no allurement yields to appetite, and all thy heart is set on high designs, high actions, but wherewith to be achieved. Great acts require great means of enterprise. Thou art unknown, unfriended, low of birth, a carpenter thy father known, thyself bred up in poverty, and straits at home, lost in a desert here, and hunger bit. Which way, or from what hope dost thou aspire to greatness? Whence authority derivest? What followers, what retinue canst thou gain, or at thy heels the dizzy multitude, longer than thou canst feed them on thy cost? Money brings honor, friends, conquest, and realms. What raised Antipater the Edomite, and his son Herod placed on Judah's throne, thy throne, but gold that got him puissant friends? Therefore, if at great things thou wouldst arrive, get riches first, get wealth, and treasure heap not difficult if thou hearken to me. Riches are mine, fortune is in my hand. They whom I favor thrive in wealth amain, while virtue, valor, wisdom sit in want. To whom thus Jesus patiently replied, Yet wealth without these three is impotent, to gain dominion or to keep it gained. Witness those ancient empires of the earth, in height of all their flowering wealth dissolved, but men endued with these have oft attained in lowest poverty to highest deeds. Gideon and Jephthah and the shepherd lad, whose offspring on the throne of Judah sat so many ages, and shall yet regain that seat and reign in Israel without end among the heathen. For throughout the world to me is not unknown what hath been done worthy of memorial. Canst thou not remember Quintius Fabricius, Curius Regalius? For I esteem those names of men so poor, who could do mighty things, and could contemn riches though offered from the hand of kings. And what in me seems wanting, but that I may also in this poverty as soon accomplish what they did, and perhaps and more. Extol not riches then, the toil of fools. The wise man's cumbrance, if not snare, more apt to slacken virtue and abate her edge, than prompt her to do aught may merit praise. What if with like aversion I reject riches and realms, yet not for that a crown, golden in show, is but a wreath of thorns, brings dangers, troubles, cares, and sleepless nights to him who wears the regal diadem, when on his shoulders each man's burden lies, for therein stands the office of a king, his honor, virtue, merit, and chief praise, that for the public all this weight he bears. Yet he who reigns within himself, and rules passions, desires, and fears, is more a king, which every wise and virtuous man attains, and who attains not, ill aspires to rule cities of men or headstrong multitudes, subject himself to anarchy within, or lawless passions in him, which he serves, but to guide nations in the way of truth by saving doctrine, and from error lead to know, and knowing worship God aright, is yet more kingly. This attracts the soul, governs the inner man, the nobler part. That other o'er the body only reigns, and oft by force which to a generous mind, so reigning, can be no sincere delight. Besides, to give a kingdom hath been thought greater and nobler done, and to lay down far more magnanimous than to assume. Riches are needless then, both for themselves and for thy reason why they should be sought. To gain a scepter, oftest better missed.